And I would suggest that we move on with the next speaker, who is a good friend and colleague of mine, Professor Jens Peter Nielsen from the University of Copenhagen. Is an expert in pig health. I don't remember, Jens Peter, what is exactly the name of your professorship? I heard medicine. I can read it. Professor of Pig Health. So, Jens Peter, thank you for being here. And if you can take actually my chair, then you will give your talk on how pigs are raised without antibiotics in Denmark. Please.
Do we have a pointer now? Super, there's a pointer. Yeah, and this is for moving. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Luca, and thank you for the invitation. And yes, my name is Jens Peter Nielsen, and I'm from Denmark, and I'm participating in the Avant project. That's one thing, but the other thing is that I've also worked in a research project in Denmark on pigs raised without antibiotics. That was initiated in actually in 2017, and at that time we did a lot of work in you could say studying and finding solution for some of the problems that was experienced in the Danish program for pigs raised without antibiotics at that time. And actually, I'll use the term raised without antibiotics, RWA, quite a bit throughout the presentation. So that's, please keep that in mind. Just turning and focusing on Denmark, a small country producing many pigs, 33 million per year, 16 million exported. There's one main large cooperative meat company called Danish Crown. That is, you could say, the major cooperative meat company in Denmark. And they decided to start a program on pigs raised without antibiotics. And they're actually exporting to many countries. You see here 127. And they also have several other special products, brands like organic, free-ranging, something we call UK production, and so on. So you could say that basically this program, the Raised Without Antibiotics program, is just one of several programs. And they decided to call it pure pork at that time. And the reason for not calling, for example, antibiotic-free is that it's actually not allowed to call it antibiotic-free in Denmark, because if you do that, you'll imply that the other animals are actually containing or antibiotic in the meat. So antibiotic-free is, we consider all meat produced in Denmark antibiotic-free. And that's why they took the name pure pork. And it is also, you could say, starting the discussion about what it's not so easy to communicate what it is, because it's basically, of course, animals that were not treated, which is then indicating also that they didn't need treatment, and also maybe to some would indicate or suggest that they were carrying less antibiotic resistance. But this, and I'll also use this name pure pork throughout the presentation. And I think, and it was running in the period 2015 until 23. And one reason for, you could say, starting the program is that it was supposed to be, you could say, rather understandable when you wanted to explain it to consumers. We can always discuss whether it is easy to understand or not for the consumer. But, and it's also a program that does not really include, you could say, that you have to change your production systems. There's no additional welfare standards like increased space or free farrowing or things like that. That would be very expensive. So you can actually use your own production system and then change your management enough so that you don't need at least the batch treatments that you normally use in pig production. The export in 23 was 70% to EU and 30% to the US. It was mainly an export product, mainly made for export. The main importers were United States, Germany, and Italy. There was also some of the products going to the home market, Denmark, but it was never a big brand in Denmark in any way. But there was a certain demand from other countries. And the extra production cost is around 10%. It's actually also the compensation or the bonus that the farmers would receive at that time. It was changing up and down a little bit in a kind of, you could say, yeah, that was how prices go, depending also of how many farmers wanted to join the program and so on. But it tells us that the extra cost is around that 10%. In the 2021, the number of herds were 49, and the peak number of slaughterings was 350,000 per year, which is actually something like 3 to 4% of Danish crowns production. And that is a relatively big production for a special product. It's, for example, bigger than the organic production in Denmark of pigs. The problem was then that it was a low utilization rate. That means only part of the pork from these animals could be sold with a higher price, and that was less than 30%. So you could say that the 30% or 20% or whatever it was that actually could be sold as raised without antibiotics for an extra price to the consumers had to carry all the expenses that was paid, for example, to the farmers for in compensation. So in brief, the system was based on, first of all, of course, that no antibiotics was used from birth to slaughter, and that is different from other countries where it's not the full period from birth to slaughter. But in this case, the program was based on animals that never received antibiotic treatment. And all the pigs that was relevant to include in this program, that means the farmer could decide to leave out very poor-doing pigs from the beginning. But all pigs that he believed in would then be ear-tagged at birth, and the ear tag would be removed if the pig needed antibiotic treatment. So it was allowed to use antibiotics for those animals that needed it, but they lost their status as raised without antibiotics. And these animals were then marked with a separate slab number when they were delivered to the slaughter plant. And that means that it was easy to identify these animals and not to mix them up with animals that were actually treated from the same herd. But they were housed together. There was no requirement for keeping those animals that never received antibiotics in separate pens or separate rooms for those that actually received their treatment. And there was several, you could say, quality assurance components involved also. There was an independent third-party audit, because there's a bit of trust involved also when the farmer has to cut off the ear tag every time that he is doing a treatment. And there was also a control system and discussion of a control system based on actually taking samples from animals to test that they're really free, and you could say the farmer felt the pressure from that, just like sampling for you could say residues in milk is a possibility in dairy production. And then they only use plant-based feed. Milk and milk products was allowed, but nothing like, for example, sprayed plasma or some things. And the health management was based on, first of all, there's no antibiotic treatment during the lifetime. Then there was some early prophylactic measures that would be recommended. We already heard a little bit in the French presentation that colostrum supply and you could say very high management standards around farrowing and in order to produce healthy and robust weaned pigs was recommended and necessary also when you didn't have the possibility to batch medicate the animals. Then south treatments with antibiotics were permitted, so it was only the individual animal that didn't receive the antibiotics. Painkillers were permitted, antiparasitic treatment was permitted, vaccination was permitted, and also the use of zinc oxide, which has after that been phased out, was permitted in weaner diets. The research project that I was involved in was a huge project with many participants from Denmark. And actually, I'll just go through a little bit about what we studied. I don't have the time to present all the results, but one thing that we made was a practical guideline for this race without antibiotic production that could be used by farmers. It was mainly, you could say, good management tools that could be relevant in these herds and actually also in other herds. And then we also looked at the productivity and the antibiotic consumption in these herds. And that's quite important. Could they obtain the same productivity, or did they experience reduced productivity after joining the program? And also, what was actually the antibiotic use in these herds all over when they only treated individual animals, and how much reduction could you obtain? And I'll present these results later. Then we developed a health monitoring system based on pathogen testing by PCR. It's also relevant for other herds, but also for these herds. And then we had some special herd health management issues that we wanted to touch on. And actually we expected that the diarrhea treatments that we have just heard about, and which is the focus of the event, would be the main problem, since there's so much batch medication for diarrhea, especially in Denmark. But actually we found out that that was not necessarily the case. But it would be a challenge for these herds in particular to phase out zinc oxide, so we worked on a management system for that, and also how to monitor diarrhea prevalence. But we found out actually that umbilical infections was a major problem in these herds, and probably the major health issue. So we looked very carefully into that, and we actually found, to our surprise, that it is that you have infection rates in the umbilical area of newborn pigs of up to 70%. And that is the background for the very widespread practice of batch medication of all pigs at the first day of life. And of course you couldn't do that in these herds, so therefore they experienced extra things. And we also tested the vaccine. It was not very effective for preventing umbilical infections. The one that we developed, it had an effect on mortality in one herd out of 2. So it's interesting to work further on this, and it's still a major problem, you could say, umbilical outpouchings, as we call them, or umbilical hernia, also in raised with antibiotics herds. Then we looked at feed intervention and especially studied the effect of reduced protein, and actually found that if you go low enough and compensate with artificial amino acids, then synthetic amino acids, then you can actually reach a level where you have a more effective control of diarrhea than you can obtain with zinc oxide. And then we look at the effect of the microbiome and resistant development. So is it really so that we can say that these animals that are coming from these herds have a lower level of resistance? I'll come back to that shortly also. But one thing when you have a farm and you want to produce these animals that never received treatments is to try to get as many animals through as you can without treatment. And that is, of course, difficult, and there's also some difference between the herds. Some can maybe have up to 90% of the animals and some a lower level. This is one herd where you can see that actually the pigs that are lost because of treatments are mainly lost in before weaning. So that means they need the treatments before weaning. After weaning, it is, and this is only until 12 weeks, but there's very few animals additional animals that are lost from the free production because of treatments. And that is that was a little bit surprising for us, actually, that you could say that the need for antibiotics was much higher in the piglets than in the post-weaning period. And you can see here's two graphs. One is for compared to the born alive. That's actually this one. And the other one is of surviving piglets. So you could say the born alive, the blue one, is including mortalities. So you see that when you include mortalities, it's only 60% of those animals that were born that actually reached, that could be produced as raised without antibiotics. And we have a little more details on this in this study, which you can also read yourself, on performance and risk factors associated with first antibiotic treatment in 2 herds. And here we looked at 2 herds, herd A and herd B. Here we see it's a little busy, this slide. And we looked at around 500 pigs in one herd and 436 in another one. And we studied the animals for 12 weeks. And you see at the end of the period, this is down here, when we have accounted for those animals that were dead or antibiotic treated, we had only 333 left in one herd and 298 in another herd. And you also see that there's a number of animals that never received these ear tags because the farmer didn't believe that they would perform all the way. And especially in one of the herds, it was a higher number that was actually, you could say, taken out from the beginning so they could be treated. And that is different how you manage that in the different herds. But altogether, the acceptance rate of live-born pigs were 64 in one herd, and of live pigs at 12 weeks was 78, and in the other one it was 68 and 79%. So you will lose some animals. It's about 20% of those that reach 12 weeks that will be lost due to treatments or were lost in these 2 herds. Yeah, and now this one is stopped. Okay, that was super. We made a survey, a questionnaire that was made by Paul Bækbo from SIGES at that time, which has also participated in the Avant project. And that was based on 38 producers, 29 responders, 76%. It was both sow herds and finisher herds and sow herds selling 30 kilo piglets. And it was 56% of the herds had the production for more than 2 years, so they had some experience. And we asked them, what is the biggest challenge of becoming a producer in this system? And they said, actually, the first problem they mentioned was in the increase in prevalence of umbilical hernia. And the reason this problem is so large is that you cannot deliver these animals for slaughter, so you have to euthanize these animals. And if you have to euthanize a high percentage of animals, that becomes certainly a problem. The next one was diarrhea in piglets and nursery pigs, which was also expected, but actually it was unexpected that hernia was such a major problem. And then the last thing they mentioned was when to initiate the antibiotic treatment and when can we wait. And that is actually, you could say, these clinical procedures in selecting the animals that need treatment and those that can recover by themselves, which is also very relevant for still also in conventional production. And they were asked what was the prevalence of umbilical hernia before and after joining, and you see it was increased from 1.9% when they joined to 5.1% when they were in the program, enrolled in the program. So actually that is a large increase and a major problem. And the biggest economic challenge, that was the extra work time per piglet. I mean, they used more time to do the right procedures, that is hygienic procedures, that's management and so on. And also actually looking at the pigs very carefully every day, because that's needed when you don't have the, you could say, security from the batch medication. and also that they used higher quality feed, which has an extra cost, and they used more vaccines. And we'll come back to the vaccines in particular, how much they used. So what was actually the productivity in these herds compared to the national average of herds? And here you see some numbers. You can see here is the national average based on 862, a sample of 862 herds. And here's the production figures in these pure pork herds in the Danish Crown program. And there were only 10 herds here to compare with. This maybe a little bit, a rather small sample, but there was not so many herds to start with, out of maybe 40, 50 herds. So you see that actually they're very similar, the production figures. Weaned per sow per year is 33, 34. Pre-weaning mortality, 13, 15. Actually surprising that it's lower in the pure pork, which you could say have a more conservative towards treatment because they will lose the status. But apparently, but maybe it's a random difference, this. And here you can look at the average daily gain. It was also comparable in the two herds. And also the post-weaning mortality here is a little higher in the pure pork herds. So maybe you could say the mortality was similar in all over the period in the two. And also the average daily gain in the finisher period was a little more than a kilo in both of the groups, and the mortality similar. So basically, these herds were able to have the same production figures as a national average, although they didn't use the batch treatment. And then I'll focus in a little bit about how much was the antibiotic consumption actually reduced. We don't have any water around here, do we? No. Yes. Thank you. There I've got some help from my colleague Jan Dahl from the Danish Agriculture and Food Council, which has shared some data and also results with me from this project that we had. And here you see these data are from the period 27 to 22. It's based on a list of all enrolled herds in the Danish Crown pure pork program. And that means that we have the start and the end date of these herds. Then it is the antibiotic use that was recorded in the VetStat database that we have in Denmark. And here we can actually, for every herd, we can have figures on the antibiotic use per herd and per age group. And this is calculated at the number of standard treatments per sow or pig per 100 days. That is a percentage of animal treated every day. The vaccine use also comes from this database. The only difference is that the herds had to submit their data that they could extract from the database, because it's not possible to go in and look for individual herds for this. And then we also looked at the production data, and actually I already showed those. And there was 146 herds that had been enrolled in the program at some stage. And these herds was also looked at before they joined the program or after they finished, in order to see if those herds that joined the program were different from, you could say, normal herds, if they had a lower level of antibiotic consumption before joining, which could also kind of explain some of the differences. And they were compared to all, you could say, all herds in Denmark, other than those that were under study, which was 4,446. And then here you see how the three groups of herds were, how much the antibiotic consumption or antibiotic use per day in percent of animals treated per day was found in these three herd categories. So we had the not pure pork, that is the ones that you could say conventional herds, the 4,500 conventional herds in Denmark. And here we look at the sows and the piglets, because they are summarized together in the Danish Vetstat. And actually you see this is a brown line we see here, and it's from 2017 to 2022 monthly, and you can see that about 2% of the animals are treated per day. This is below the yellow card limit, actually, which is 3 point something, of course, on average. And you also see that the candidate herds that was either before they joined the program or after, they were about the same level. And actually also those raised without antibiotics were at the same level, meaning that there was no demand for not treating the sows, so it also makes sense that they treated in the same way as other herds. So basically no reduction in the treatment of sows in those raised without antibiotic herds. If you look at the weaners, then there was a major difference. So here we see the conventional herds, the 4,500 Danish herds. They are around, from 10 to 8% of animals treated. Yellow card is something like 14, 15. So, but this is the national average, you would say. And there we have the raised without antibiotics, the pure pork animals, and they are only about 2%. So this is a major reduction, and that's of course because it's only a certain percentage that is treated. And then in the middle we have those that are candidate herds, and actually you see that they are lower than the national figures, and so that it is that you could say they are selected among herds that already have a low antibiotic consumption, so those that joined the program. And when we look at the finishers, there's also a difference. You see here the conventional herds, the brown line, and here you see the yellow or light brown, and you see that it's considerably lower, and those candidate herds, they are in the middle. And if we summarize all this, you see that here we have the conventional, not pure pork herds, and here they have around 2% treated in the sows, 8% in the weaners, and 1.5 in the finishers. And if we look at the pure pork, the corresponding is 1.7, 1.8, and 0.6. So actually, this is highly statistically significant, and it's also, you could say, it's a marked reduction. And actually, in percent, no, we'll wait a little bit with that, but it is around 70% reduction here is the weaner, and 65 here in the finishers. So that was kind of reassuring to see that they really had a lower level. Then if we look at the use of antibiotics, then you'll see that, not antibiotics, vaccines. They will see that they have a higher vaccine use in the pure pork herds. Here's 2017. There's few herds that actually vaccinates against post-weaning diarrhea, E. coli, but 32% of the animals are vaccinated in these herds for Lawsonia, and this is only 6% in the, you could say, conventional herds, national average. And in 2022, there's more vaccinating against post-weaning diarrhea, and also a high level of vaccination in those pure pork herds compared to the national average. So they spend more money on vaccines, these herds, and this is one of the ways to control, to avoid the use of antibiotics. So actually, this is a conclusion summarizing the effect on antibiotic vaccines and productivity. 75% reduction for weaners in antibiotic use, 66% for finishers, more vaccine use, and no change in productivity. Basically, they could keep up the same level of productivity as the national average. The microbiome results are rather interesting because, and resistome results, and this is only kind of brief overview. You can read more in this paper if you are interested. But you can see that, of course, antibiotic treatment will change the microbiome. We know that. But this change is not detectable at slaughter anymore. And it's the same with the resistant genes. Yes, after the treatment you'll see an increase in resistant genes, but this difference will disappear before slaughter. But what we also found was that actually if you remove and isolate the animals treated with antibiotics, then you'll reduce the abundance of resistant genes in those that were free from treatment. So in order to obtain this reduction in resistant genes, you actually need to keep the treated animals separated from those that were not treated. If you mix them, then you'll get more or less the same level. And then I want to acknowledge all these people from institutions like SEGES, Danish Crown, DTU, State Serum Institute, and my colleagues at the University of Copenhagen. And then I don't know if we have time to, I'll just say this last word. This is what we call a light extinguisher. This is what you see here in Denmark when we don't have a happy ending. This production was terminated in Denmark in June 23 so far, because the market for these animals was not present. They couldn't make a good business out of it, the slaughter plant, the Danish Crown, and therefore they terminated the program. They still have the other programs like organic and other brands, special brands for export or for home market, but they don't have this one anymore. So that was the situation. But of course, we learned a lot about reduction of antibiotics from the program. So it was successful as a, you could say, learning experience, but not as a market experience. I don't know if you want me to answer these questions that you gave me. Yeah, of course. But I'm still using less time than you, Luca, so that's fine.
It's not a competition, we are already 5 minutes later.
Yeah. Anyway, you could say why antibiotic-free, and that is probably because there's perceived some extra freedoms from residues, better animal health, reduced antibiotic risk, but this is difficult to communicate actually. So that's one problem. It's very interesting to run this, and we learn a lot. We learn a lot about how do you manage animal by single animal treatment rather than batch treatment. And the other questions from Luca was, do you foresee that the market share of antibiotic-free become higher? I think it will be included in broader concepts, including animal welfare, climate effect, and biodiversity effects. So I think it will be one part of a higher quality brand, and maybe not a single brand based on this. And then what is needed to intensify, I think, national regulations and on reduction of AMU, and that is especially reduced batch medication, which will in essence make if you don't use batch medication, then you more or less have a program for a race without antibiotics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jens Peter. And we are a little bit short of time, but I would have a quick question. I think you have already answered one of the questions that I had at the end of my presentation. So it seems that this is a viable strategy for minimizing the use of antibiotics without affecting the productivity of the farm. You have shown clearly that basically all the productivity parameters, including the health parameters, were in line with those of standard conventional farms. But then at the end, you also described clearly what was the end of this Danish experience. So one of the questions, the next questions I actually had listed in my introduction was, what is the key to success? And obviously there is something went wrong in Denmark that didn't go wrong in France. There may be also cultural and the way the production system is structured into two countries. But one number that I actually noticed that was completely different compared to the French numbers is the percentage of increased cost. Because you mentioned is about 10% increased cost. You have also explained the why vaccination was used more, and more labor-intensive work was required at the farm. We will hear later on Stine talking about that. But the number I get from France is 1% of additional cost. So I need to understand, because maybe this is one of the technical issues where they can explain the success of this production system. So I would like to actually ask the colleague from France, from Cooper, to explain about, if we are talking about the same number.
Yeah, no, there is no extra costs, because when it's a certification, so when the farmer at Copper enter this certification, we already check that they have a good health status, good performances, and they are able to reduce and enter in the specification and to provide free antibiotic pork for the consumer. So that means that at this step, you shouldn't have any reduction of the performance. The risk is managed before, and then we have enough pigs for the market. So the slide that showed Jean-Noël before is that you won't have any extra costs for the farmer. Also, at the end, we also they receive an added value, some cents per kg. So that means that the margin is maintained also at the farm level. So at the end, it's not a cost for the farmer. And it's important, otherwise we won't have a lot of farmers that will enter in the certification.
Yeah, so basically, if I understand you right, then you don't pay a bonus to the farmer if he is producing pigs raised without antibiotics.
Yes, you have two specifications. The first one is the easiest one, is when you have free antibiotic after weaning, after 42 days. When the farmer enter in this certification, all the pigs receive extra cents. It's around 1 or 2 cents per kg of pigs, even if the pigs receive antibiotics. Okay, but of course we have a traceability to the slaughterhouse to identify which one received the treatment. Then we collect only the pork without antibiotics for the consumer. But the idea here is that we do not want that. We want to avoid that the farmer cheats. You know, if you pay only on the rare free antibiotics pigs. And the second one is the second certification. Is the second step is after is free of antibiotic at birth. So when you have better health condition at the farm, especially in maternity, then the farmer, enter in the specification, and he has an additional cent around. I have not the exact, but it's 1 cent, about 1 cent higher for also all the pigs. Okay, and then the farm is controlled every year and check if the ALEA is very low and there is no problem at the farm. If there is an increase of antibiotic use and the farmer is not controlling good health and performance, it go out of the specification.
But you are talking about a program where it's no antibiotics after weaning.
Both, you have two specifications.
And that was 1 cent extra bonus.
One for after weaning, and the second one is 2 cents. My colleague will give the exact number.
But what about the ones that are all life free from treatments? What is the bonus to the farmer? 1 additional then.
Yeah.
So it's 2. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the sake of time, thank you very much, Mathieu. For the sake of time, we close the first session here. It's time to have a coffee break, but I think this is something we can further discuss later on, because it seems I have already spotted one different. The farmers in France are compensated for all the pigs they are produced, including the non-antibiotic free. Apologies. With all these technical issues, the chairman got confused. And actually, it's the farmer perspective from Denmark that is going to be presented now. But I was going to say, and if you hear Stine, maybe during or after your presentation, you can actually explain a little bit more in detail what was the bonus paid to the farmers in Denmark, because I understand one of the difference compared to France is that the farmer received only the bonus for the antibiotic-free animals. So, all that said, I'll give you the word, Stine, and I hope you can hear me. Try to say something. Yes.
Yeah. I didn't hear your answer, or your question. It's very, you fall out.
Yeah, sorry, but we can hear you very well, so please go ahead with your presentation about the farmer perspective on antibiotic-free production in Denmark. Thank you, Stine.
I will try. So, do you see it?
Yes, thank you.
I need to hear from you. Is everything okay? Do you see my screen?
Online, well.
Super. Yeah. Thanks for having me at the Avant workshop. I'm educated as a nurse, and I have 25 years experience in pig production. My presentation will go back in time, so you will not see so many numbers and figures, but I will try to give you an insight in how the change to antibiotic-free production influence on our management of the farm. Short history: we had nearly 500 sows conventional pig production and sale of pigs with 30 kilos. Our health status was low SPF with Mycoplasma and AP12. The rest has already been told. And the requirements for antibiotic-free production has also already been told from Ms. Peter. So I will move to the choices we made from the start. And this were the expensive choices we made. We increased the lactation period from 4 to 5 weeks. And in order to do that, we had to reduce the number of sows from this 419 to 450. So it made fewer pigs, and of course that was expensive for us. Then we made a choice to give influenza vaccine for all gills and sow 14 days before farrowing to make sure we didn't have any flu in the farrowing period. Then we also made some choices which was not so expensive. Wash between every batch, special tools and equipment for every section, no running back with equipment, shoes for every section, and we used separate single use of gloves, needles, scalpels for every litter. So we didn't take anything from one litter to another. No human traffic in the pens. We operate everything from a corridor. We only went into the pen if it was very necessary. And when we started with extra vaccine, we also choose to do it without needle. So, what the most crucial change we did to start this production was, of course, change in treatment. Before, we gave day 1 treatment, it was Draxin, and then we gave herd or batch treatment for the weaned pigs. So, of course, stop day 1 treatment, stop herd treatment. And you don't do that without anything happens. So, what happened when we stopped for the day 1 treatment? Inflammation of joints went up, umbilical hernia due to infection went up, respiratory tract infections went up. The only thing we didn't see any change in was the piglet diarrhea. So we had to find a new way to deal with this problem. So the measures we did to limit infection of joint and umbilical cord was we added disinfection after washing, we put Stylosan powder on the floor, we put extra straw in the pen, so to minimize the contact to the floor for the newborn piglets. The straw also had a positive effect for the sow, like a lower stress level. But extra straw is a big problem in the manure system. And you also have to be concerned about toxins from fungus in the straw. Then we put up extra heating lamp for the smallest pigs, and we changed all our light bulbs from 100 to 150 vet. And then we had a very big focus on the sow's well-being. We also had this respiratory infection was going up, and measures to avoid that was to lock the litters at day 4, meaning after day 4, no moving of pigs, strict sectioning, installing of central heating, and a big focus on the indoor climate. And you can say less mixing between litters is always a good thing. So we tried many things, but measures we stuck to was wash, and we added soap, disinfection, and drying out. And it was easier when we had central heating to make a good drying out together with oil heating. Stalosan powder, extra straw, and soft bedding for the piglets. And heating lamps from 100 to 150 watt. And then this great focus on the sow. It was feed optimization, pain reliever, and big focus on the stress level, and a lot of tender love and care for the sows. And I'm good. It's the sow saying, I'm good after farrowing. It's the sow who wants to get up, drink water, wants to eat some straw, and interesting in getting food. Then she is well and good after farrowing. So what did we achieve for all these measures? The joint infection could not be controlled as well as with antibiotic. We had marginal increase in mortality among the piglets because the treatment was started too late, and the infection got severe and difficult to fight. Then we had an increase in umbilical hernia, and the antibiotic use, the consumption of antibiotic for these animals didn't change. It didn't go down. And then it was difficult for the staff to make the decision about the necessity of a treatment. So sometimes we were too late, and that made this marginal increase in mortality. Then there's herd or batch treatment of weaned pigs. Before, we did it when we saw outbreak of diarrhea, and it was all pigs in a pen who were treated. Not in the section, only in the pens. We had tested, and we saw E. coli, but no Lawsonia. But we had Lawsonia in the slaughter pig herd. Side effect of this herd treatment was reduction of respiratory diseases. So what happened when we stopped this treatment? Yeah, now we saw who's actually getting the diarrhea. And it was the big pigs who overeat. They could eat, and they have undigested food in the stomach, and there was more place for the bacteria. They got something to live from. Then we had the little pigs who didn't eat enough. They couldn't develop the guts. They couldn't take in enough energy. And then we saw diarrhea when the pigs were misfeeding, when the food master was doing something wrong. Then we also saw it. And then we started to see diarrhea at 20 kilo. And we started to see a little bit Lawsonia in the test at that time. So, about the respiratory infections, we saw more pigs that collapsed. And we couldn't really treat them with any antibiotic that helped. They just stayed bad and didn't die, but they didn't grow also. We saw more snot, more coughing, and it was especially the poor pigs from the pharynx section who were most in risk of collapsing. We tried many measures like Gold added to the feed. It was awful expensive and we couldn't see any effect. We tried the pain reliever and drinking water. We were not sure we could see any effect. We tried active carbon. We didn't see any effect, but everything got black. But measures that we stuck to was optimal local environment. We also put up central heating in Klima, in Wiener section. Collection and treatment of all poor pigs, feed with a lower protein level, restricted feeding. Restricted feeding doesn't mean that they don't get so much to eat, but they get what they can eat, and between each feeding they should be emptying the feeder. Then we had focus on water allocation, disinfection between every batch, and for the smallest pig we gave extra water in the feeder because they wasn't able to use the automatic water system before they had a certain age. Then we add acid to the drinking water 3 days a week. Potato flour every day on the floor, and we added vaccines against Mycoplasma, PCV2, and Lawsonia. And then we went from taking care of a pen with pigs to individual caretaking of the pigs. So, no magic, just good old caretaking. We always used to say it's page 1 in the book for pig breeding and production. What did we achieve? We got pigs with healthy stomachs, few problems 1 week after weaning, and very few pigs that fall out of the antibiotic-free concept. A marginally lower growth than before antibiotic-free production. Hernia was always an issue, and significantly lower antibiotic consumption. Brief about slaughter pigs. Changes that had the greatest impact was better wash, disinfection, and drying out. A gentle startup, especially with the food, and again, restrictive feeding, and then stop for this welcome treatment. Normally after 5 days, they had 3 days with antibiotic, and then everything was running good. But we stopped doing that. So, what happened to the antibiotic consumption? This is sow and suckling piglets, and as you can see, 2014 was the year before the project, 2015 was the first year of production, and then 2016 where it was normal production. And it nearly didn't change. And of course the sows was able to be treated, so it makes a lot of sense. But also the suckling piglets, fewer pigs got antibiotic, but those who get it, they got much more. Then the weaners. There was a significant drop in the use of antibiotic. It was 58%. And for slaughtered pigs, we saw a drop for 82%. And in the slaughtered pig, we remained the rotation time of 14 weeks. So they didn't stay in the stable for a longer time because we skipped the antibiotic. Something about hernia. This is crucial. This is the mortality among the weaners. And in 2015, our first year, we saw more and more pigs with hernia. We didn't kill them in farrowing section, we weaned them, and suddenly it exploded for us among the weaners. And we had to put down a lot of pigs. That's the big top in number 3 quarter. But you also see in 2016 we were above 3%. My husband nearly lost his motivation for the antibiotic-free production in this period. You must understand that a pig with hernia very often is a good, healthy, and good growing pig. But they need hospital pens plus soft bedding, and many of them cannot be transported to the slaughtery. So the solution is to put them down. And this is the bastard. So, is antibiotic-free production possible? Yes, definitely. We achieved 30% approved pigs. It costs more, it needs higher price for the meat. It requires the right staff. Not everyone can do it. It takes a good health status in the herd, added with relevant vaccines, and always have focus on keeping the infection pressure down. Find and treat sick pigs, maintain high hygiene, and keep a strict sectioning. And accept that individual animal caretaking takes time. And as we also heard before, it all starts in farrowing section. A good start is essential. A good growing pig starts its career with a mother who works from day one. She needs to have easy farrowing and a high amount of colostrum. And in order to give big litters enough colostrums, we did a lot of split milking. 14 pigs the udder, the rest in the corner, and then changed every hour. And it was the first 12 hours after farrowing, then we could make cross fostering of the pigs. And the sow should not have fever after farrowing, and the piglets should be without wounds and scratches. It's opening for bacteria. Piglets who don't become latecomers can also be a good antibiotic-free pig. And it's very crucial that piglets learn to eat food before weaning. We start to give food 7 days after farrowing, and we just give more and more and more. And before farrowing, they eat a lot of food, and it's very important. So, but is there any concern about this production? Yeah, there is. More pigs will be put down because of hernia. Must we accept that? And can we get employees who accept that? And what about the consumer? Will he accept that? Can we recruit the right employees? And can the meat be sold at the required additional price? Or, my question, is there a third way? For example, if we kept the day one treatment, I would say it would be much, much easier. That was my short and quick presentation, but I'm ready to answer questions.
Hi, Stine. Thank you very much for your talk. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Yeah, so basically, your presentation, like the previous ones, have already answered the first question we had at the beginning of this workshop. Can this be a strategy to minimize the use of antimicrobials down to a minimum without impacting the productivity of the farm? You had some issues with the umbilical hernia and mortality, especially before weaning. But this is a little bit in contrast with the data that were shown by Jens Peter, where basically the mortality was the same compared to conventional farm. So if I have to conclude on that, maybe there is a farm factor that has to be taken into consideration, or how do you explain this, the difference observed at your farm compared to the rest of the raised without antibiotics production in Denmark?
I don't see so many differences. I didn't hear all your question. I'm sorry.
You couldn't hear?
Not all of it.
Yeah, but
something
basically,
important
Jens
fell out.
Peter showed that the mortality was the same compared to conventional farms, whereas you observed some increased mortality, especially due to umbilical hernia and omphalitis. So how do you explain this? Is it a farm factor, or you think, what is your explanation about this difference? And Jens Peter, I think it was is already, maybe you want to answer first? I don't know how they will hear you with that microphone, but try. Speak slowly.
I'm the one to start, yes. The higher mortality was pigs we put out in weaners. The rest was nearly the same. If we didn't have this hernia issue, the mortality among the weaners would not be higher.
Yeah, but I agree, and I don't know if you can hear me, Stine. Jens Peter again,
yes,
here from Denmark. But actually, I showed the same thing, because in my data, I showed that they had a higher mortality in the post-weaning period. So that was something like 5% in the weaners in the raised without antibiotics, and it was around 3 in the conventional. And that's a high increase, of course. So you could see it's nearly double or whatever. And that is probably that. The little surprising was that we saw a lower mortality in the pre-weaning, and I'm not absolutely sure about it, but I think especially this about the hernia, you can see directly the same effect in the data that I showed.
Yeah, thanks to both of you. Now I think it's clear. Maybe one of the questions we can discuss this afternoon, and I hope, Stine, you will be present for the plenary session, is about the first day antibiotic treatment, which seems to have a good effect in preventing this umbilical hernia. Is it needed or not? Yes, Jens Peter.
Yeah, just
quick one.
Do you hear me, Stine? Now?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe this phone is better, but can you just describe the bonus you got? The bonus extra payment you got for the OOA pigs throughout the years, because it was changing. It started high and became lower, but can you describe it? Do you have it on top of your mind?
We started at 2 kroner per kilo, and it went down to 70 cents, like that. Yeah. But around 1 kroner, that would cover our costs.
Yeah, super. Thank you. And for those that don't know what Danish kroner, I can say that, well, 1 euro is 7.5 Danish kroner. So you could say that 2 kroner is something like 28 or something euro cents. That was where they started. And then they ended around 10 euro cents. So, but it goes up and down, so it's not something stable. But that is more or less, I mean, what it needed to make the farmer make the production.
Yeah, and that was the question, Stine, that I asked you before you started your presentation. So now we got the answer. I think we have identified 2 differences. The bonus was actually a little bit higher in Denmark compared to France, where it was only 1-2 cents for those piglets that do not receive antibiotics after weaning, and another 1-2 cents for those that do not receive antibiotics from birth. So altogether about 1%, a little bit more than 1% of per kilogram of carcass in increasing in the bonus. But then the farmers receive the bonus for all the pigs, including those that receive antibiotics. So we are talking about technical differences, but maybe this afternoon we can also discuss if this technical and which of these technical differences may have impacted the outcome of this production system in the two countries. I hope, Stine, you will be there this afternoon.
I have to be in Allinge til folkemøde later today.
Okay, never mind. I mean, the Danish sector is represented here by Jens Peter and Janni. So, but thank you very much for taking time to present. Sorry.
Yeah, I can see there are a few questions in the chat waiting, but I think we can take them later.
Yes, we do. It's